Diplomacy generally steps in at the idea of competition has captured the attention, imagination, and anxieties of national security practitioners. For scholars of the international politics, however, it is an old hat. The military, the advisory arm, the academia, the intelligence, and the MOD that are the national foreign policy mechanism that is in constant preparation to succeed the nation at the two related but not identical tasks, war and competition, at same juncture operating on a thin vulnerable line. The requirements of war generally are well understood even as they become increasingly diverse and sophisticated, and preparing for it demands that the nation has and knows how to use the military assets needed to defeat all the adversaries in any ways. On the other hand, the competition, however, demands that India finds a way to discourage and therefore to minimize the frequency with which other actors choose to challenge India's national security, integrity, and interests, and to find ways to resolve those challenges favorably without needing to resort to war when they do arise. That is your passive aggressive diplomacy. Hi, I am Vipul Tamane, and today on Diplomacy Direct, we are going to engage in an age-old dilemma that the military faces about where does the national mechanism draw a line onto the state diplomatic affairs and hand them over to the military. To discuss this on a full spectrum from military and civil diplomacy standpoint, today we have alphabetically General PG Kamath and Ambassador Sanjiv Arora. Lieutenant General PG Kamath, PVSM AVSM YSM SM, has served on all the frontiers of our nation in his 40 years of military service. He has also been on official tours to China, Russia, Nepal, most of ASEAN nations, and the Middle East. For 15 years, he has commanded troops to fight against terrorism and the separatist movements in Rajouri and Poonch and other sectors in Jammu and Kashmir. For his tenacious actions as commander at line of control in Operation Rakshak, he was awarded the Sena Medal, and for Operation Parakram, he was awarded Yuddha Seva Medal by the President. The last position before his superannuation that he served was as a commandant of Army War College, where the officers are taught leaderships, skills, tactics, operations, geopolitics, and strategy. So it's pleasure to have you here. Welcome to Diplomacy Direct, General Kamath, sir.
Thank you, Vipul.
And to discuss with General Kamath, we have with us Ambassador Sanjiv Arora. Ambassador Arora is a former secretary of the Ministry of External Affairs and has also served in various capacities at the headquarter level and abroad. He was the head of the United Nations Political Division in the Middle East and Africa region to oversee India's contribution to United Nations peacekeeping operations and other activities from Center for United Nations Peacekeeping, that is your CUNPK, and the United Nations Service Institution, that is USI, which is based out of New Delhi, and co-chairing joint working groups on peacekeeping issues with associated nations. Ambassador Arora has served as India's longest serving ambassador to Qatar. As ambassador to Lebanon, he was noteworthily instrumental in the deployment of 900 strong Indian peacekeepers in the UN interim force in Lebanon, which is the UN IFIL. And during the Gulf War, he was the acting consul general in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, for diplomatic and military matters. He is associated with the United Services Institution of India, an associate member of Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, and is the fellow of Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies, APCSS, Honolulu, Hawaii, USA. It's immense pleasure to have you and welcome to Diplomacy Direct, Ambassador Arora.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, sir. So, as per our premise for today, we are assuming under prejudice that sometimes in the international context that are often over the boundaries of diplomatic norms and standards that manifest in ways that are direct, obvious, and at times violent, as happens in armed conflicts generally. And sometimes they emerge as short of war tussles, for example, in primary areas like trade, information exchange, human rights, environmental conservation, and international law. From India's short yet busy history of 75 years, how certain are we that conventional state diplomacy is also proving to be optimum, or is it time right now for military diplomacies to step in action? General Kamath sir, we'll start with you first.
Firstly, I am not here to tell that the military has to take over and the diplomats will have no word. Rather, diplomacy has to be done by the diplomats. No one else can do it other than the diplomats. But if you really look at it a bit dispassionately, because we are not playing one against the other, we are looking at a whole nation, how it has really done its job in the past 75 years. Just a proof of the pudding is in the eating. Let's see Pakistan. What are our relations? No questions. We have seen Afghanistan. What are our relations now? Nepal. What are our relations now? Myanmar. What are our relations now? Bangladesh. What are our relations now? Sri Lanka. What are our relations now? Do I need any further to say that any system, be it the army, be it the diplomacy, be it the economics, to say that everything is going on fine would be fooling ourselves. So there has to be improvement. And that is what we need. Pursuit of excellence should be each one of our concerns. So what does diplomacy generally do? It wields the national power, the instruments of national power in the domain of diplomacy. That is what we call mediation, conferences, dialogues, encouragement, persuasion, inducement, coercion. Threat of coercion, they may not really coerce, but the very threat of coercion has to see all this in the diplomatic domain in the pursuit of national interests. Are our national interests have been fully served? Perhaps no, because we don't even have a national security doctrine, which will say your national goals are these. If your national goals are these, your regional goals, your worldwide, each region, your goals are these. These goals have to be made into quantifiable objectives in terms of trade, in terms of military, in terms of political, in terms of having allies, in terms of a power in the Committee of United Nations. All this is in the vision and in the orbit of a diplomat, how we really mix it, mold international opinion. So, but the test of diplomacy is with your neighbors. Let's look at Chanakya, the Mandala theory, the inner circle of all what I have mentioned. If Pakistan has to be managed, it has to be managed by Iran and Afghanistan, the outer ring, so that their attention is there also and not fully riveted against us. What is China doing? He is doing a beautiful thing by riveting our entire attention to a very puny but a powerful nation in terms of missiles and nuclear and conventional arms and proxy war, riveting our attention to the West in order to free itself to do whatever shenanigans it wants to do. So each country has got this one. One or two examples where I think we have bundled. We have a number of things. Even army is bundled. It's not. I have not been pointing at the diplomats only. 1990, Aung San Suu Kyi was in the prison by the military regime. 93, the Indian army was all set to work with the military regime in order to flush out the terrorists in the Indo-Myanmar border. Everything was ready. our cultural ministry or some ministry awards Sir Jawaharlal Nehru award of international understanding a day before the entire operations washed out. Just see, left hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. Now let us take the similar agreement we have to do bilaterally, all issues bilaterally with Pakistan. That is what. But who has told you to do bilaterally with China? China is a powerful fellow. You need other allies with you together in order to tackle him. But we want to do bilateral with the China. We don't want to comment on Xinjiang human rights. We don't want to comment on Tibet. We don't want to do Taiwan, and we want to call it Chinese Taipei because he wants to tell. We don't want to talk even of the origin of pandemic. And we'll not talk about the incursions which are taking place. What a tragedy. Even in the recent meeting, UN General Assembly 76th session, not a word we have spoken against incursions. As of nothing has happened, it's a small things, these small generals will sort it out. The MLA has come and occupied your territory. Then you come to the SCO, again, not a word against. Then you come to the BRICS, not a word against China. You go to China, to Tibet and say only Vistarvad, you don't pinpoint China. In 2020, in the Quad meeting of foreign ministers, Pompeo is telling there is problem in South China Sea and Himalayas. Jaishankar only speaks in innuendos. Why are you not actually curtailing and pinpointing and accusing and shaming or targeting China diplomatically? Army military comes later. Yes, they have done a coercive diplomacy to get a strong leader, now Wing Commander Abhinandan back. Well done. See, our diplomats are very good. But what I have found, they are not really empowered with the element of strategy. They do not visit the borders. Otherwise, no person who has visited Ladakh will ever bargain with the Chusul Heights, that is the Kailash range, with that finger 4 to 8. I can challenge you, if your 900 kilometers of Depsan plains have been occupied, it threatens the very DBO airfield. If DBO falls, your flank of Siachen is open. Satstam Valley in the north will join. How can any person who has seen the ground ever get down your own area of LAC? Even the 1959 LAC is the rig is ours. He has made you get down your own side of LAC. Your LAC, as per perception, is finger 8. Now you can't even patrol that area.
Ambassador Arora, what do you want to say in terms of Minister Jaishankar's innuendos, as General Sab just mentioned right now?
It's a pleasure to have this interaction with the highly distinguished and decorated senior colleague of the Indian Army, General Kamath, and yourself, forging joint approaches among the civilian officials, diplomats, and defense colleagues for furthering our national interest. And as I was saying, it is all about protection and promotion of the national. So many nations of diplomacy and what diplomats do, and about our national interest. And I think that the mission of diplomats, and that through different means, through a very different professional training and orientation, is the task of our colleagues in the defense forces. When we all join the Indian Foreign Service, of course, possibly the most fulfilling part of it is our attachment with the defense forces. I warmly recall those days in 1985, having joined in 1984, when 12 of us were flown from Chandigarh in an AN-12 to Leh in Ladakh to be with the Trishul Div 3 Division of the Indian Army, and those those wonderful 2 weeks of training and interaction. But I have also always said that we need to have this much longer. 2 weeks is far too short, and a lot of it turns out to be really social bonhomie or professional camaraderie. I think it would be, in my view, extremely useful for our system as a whole to have 6 months to 1 year attachment of every officer on the civilian side, whether it is the Foreign Service or the Indian Administrative Service or other services for that matter, with our defense forces, and that should encompass opportunities to really perform some of the tasks that they are doing, be deployed near to our frontiers, close to the outposts, and so on. So to start with, let's take the case of the Indian Foreign Service. Before an officer becomes a joint secretary, so I'm talking of at the level of 15 to 20 years experience, every officer must spend 6 months to 1 year with the 3 wings of our defense forces. An extremely important issue is India's contribution to UN peacekeeping 1948 onwards. I mean, India has been the largest contributor to the UN peacekeeping missions, including the most challenging ones. And of course, a large number of our personnel have made the supreme sacrifice in that capacity. My last overseas posting was as ambassador to Lebanon, where we've had from 1998, 900 personnel of the Indian Army doing absolutely a great job in the United Interim Mission in Lebanon, in Lebanon, UNIFIL. They have really, as everywhere else, I think our defense forces undoubtedly are most highly reputed for their valor, for their professionalism, for their dedication and commitment, and their sacrifices, be it in the discharge of their duties within the country or outside, for example, in the UN peacekeeping missions.
So for today's conversation,
Please, yeah.
we are sticking to Pakistan and China, right? Because again, civil military diplomacy is a vast topic. But then, so with Pakistan, Indian diplomacy has, always a lingering feeling that, what's old is new again. And here, for whatever reason, the Indian diplomacy failed in negotiating peace with Pakistan. And the military coercive strategies are an existential deterrent force, but seems to have decoupled from the mainstream civil diplomacy here. And the employment of civil military tag teaming for diplomatic hybridization is actually necessary and is the need of the hour at this juncture. And same can be said about China, but we'll come to that at a later part. So I'll start with, again, you, sir, to defend against the statement that the civil diplomacy with Pakistan has failed.
All that you have very prominently brought up two of our relations with Pakistan. Better example of really an extremely fruitful, a very timely, a very, very comprehensive, a very well thought of tactical and strategic and timely consultation and coordination among the diplomatic arm of the Indian government and the military establishment than what happened in 1971. I think this is an unparalleled example in the annals of both diplomacy and military history. Whether it was in terms of our humanitarian efforts or heightening awareness in the Committee of Nations, sensitizing the international community as a whole of the atrocities committed by Pakistan Army in the then East Pakistan, and its very, very serious ramifications, both in humanitarian and geopolitical and strategic and security. It was undoubtedly a glorious moment, a glorious chapter for both our diplomats and the military strategists. And I think it is very timely that you are having this discussion as the country is commemorating and celebrating the 50th anniversary of that great accomplishment.
General notion about the East Pakistan that you just brought up is that even the separation primarily was when the Indian forces got along with Mukti Bahini and strategized the whole separation and the demarcation and all the strategy. So since then, even when we speak about military, is the Indian military always seen merely as a force of coercion by the diplomatic community, or how does the diplomatic community bring in the military input for its next step? So a very quick idea onto that, and then we'll move to the next question.
As I look at it, the Indian Defense Forces, the diplomats per se, and I can really say on the strength of my own experience, Indian diplomats per se have always functioned with them in an esprit de corps as in arms towards our shared national interests. And yes, what has happened post April, May 2020 from our standpoint is really, it has thrown a very huge challenge. And as has been articulated, both from the diplomatic side as well as from our defense forces in different forms and formats, different fora, it cannot be obviously business as usual with China until and unless status quo ante is restored. But yes, the progress so far has been far from satisfactory. 14th round of the commander level talks has just ended, and I think there are certainly some very serious unresolved issues, and that is where I think jointly we have to see. And in that context, the institution of the Chief of Defense Staff was a very, very, very useful mechanism.
Just a moment back, you mentioned taking matters to the UN, and as history says it all, that while the UN MOGIP observership was in Jammu Kashmir, and General Kamath sir would be the bearing of the testament to hear that again there's been wars even after the UN MOGIP has been there in presence. General Kamath sir, on this note, on Pakistan, very quick, what would be your views on what Ambassador Arora has said?
Before I enter Pakistan, I want to correct one issue which might have been misunderstood. I never said that we should go to UN for China. We'll fight the Chinese on our own. But not to tell international community of what has happened is what I am against. We have to say we'll fight. We don't want the US forces. We don't want UK. We don't want Japan. To be frank with you, and Ambassador Arora will bear me out, we can take on China in Ladakh and Arunachal now. Yes, if other weapons have been used, that is for the depth areas and all to manage. I never said UN is the limp body. We can only prolong conflict, as it has happened. The festering wound of J&K is still festering us. See, I won't tell only diplomacy. Everything has failed in vis-a-vis Pakistan. Let's say in 47-48 war, when the instrument of accession was signed by Maharaja The entire J&K was legally ours. His entire territory was ours. But what did we do? We went into the UN, complained to the UN. Where did we complain? Under Chapter 6, that is peaceful resolution of dispute, and not Chapter 7, which is for aggression. And under Chapter 7, Article 42 tells Security Council can take action in order to remove that aggression. So an aggressor, an invader, we promoted him to a disputant by our round complaining of the UN, and it's still on. I am not blaming the diplomats at all, please, Sanjiv. That time, the entire first 18 years, entirely it was with the Jawaharlal Nehru. He was this one. There was no question. There was no opposition. There was no advice. It is all, though it is a family estate, he was managing the foreign policy. Coming to non-alignment, just think, please do not misunderstand me again, that if we had not joined non-aligned and become a power bloc with the United States of America, we would have joined CENTO, we could have joined Seattle. Do you think China would have dared to attack in 1962 if we are members of the power bloc? Plus, UK and US were all together pro-Pakistan in the United Nations for the J&K. They kept the wounded festering. We have lost, due to our non-aligned, 78,000 square kilometers, a third of J&K. We have lost 37,555 square kilometers of Atsai Kane for being a non-aligned. Who told you to be non-aligned? All power blocks, you didn't have US troops to come out here. Ultimately, what happened? Nehru was begging Kennedy to send his air force and his pilots and all to fight the Chinese. After losing then membership of United Nations Security Council, twice it was offered to us. Once by Eisenhower, I have gone through the documents. Once by Bulgarian as the sixth one. Eisenhower gave it in place of China, nationalist China. Bulgarian gave us at the sixth member of the permanent. Both we refused and told China needs it. What about an annexation of Tibet? China annexed Tibet. December 1950, El Salvador passed a resolution to speak about the Chinese aggression in the United Nations General Assembly. Do you know who opposed it? That we'll resolve ourselves. Britain and India. That was our state. We are losing a buffer. We are losing a nation, which is independent nation. And we oppose and oppose the El Salvador's that we'll sort it out. Where have we sorted it out? Now to Simla Agreement, 1972. 93,000 prisoners were given without sorting out the J&K issue. Army is also to be blamed. Please, I'm talking as a nation. 54 of our own prisoners were still there, are still there. We have not even taken all our prisoners back, including the war criminals who did the genocide in East Pakistan, were given out on a platter. Indira Gandhi and D.P. Dhar and all. Absolutely. You have to understand why we have come to this state. Later, when a formal, after Nehru's this one, there was obviously the diplomatic corps got a figure of their own, their image of their own, the intellect of their own, their standing of their own, their identity of their own. Before that, this is odd because I am only trying to highlight the point that there was no coordination. 2 + 2 means 2 + 2. The foreign policy, the execution has to be done by the diplomats. They are good at it. But the policy formulation cannot be done only by MEA. It needs the National Security Advisor, it needs the CDS, and it needs probably some more, what we call stakeholders. MEA, Manmohan Singh wanted to make Siachen a mountain of peace. What mountain of peace? Would you ever got it? Thank God that time National Security R.K. Narayan, and then hesitatingly our army chief, and that's why it has not gone. Otherwise, he wanted to vacate it. Manmohan Singh going to the Sarmel Sheikh Nam meet and speaking to Gilani on the sidelines and telling Kashmir and Baluchistan is also equally important, or words to that effect. How can you convey? Telling that the onus of Baluchistan turmoil is India. So if I go with the Pakistan, the list is endless. So I do not want to really go into, because we have failed as a nation, not only as a diplomacy. We won the war. What is the use? 47, 48 war, 1/3 area we lost. 71, we gave back everything, including 65, we gave back Hajipir Pass. If there was a military advice to Lal Bahadur Shastri when he went to Tashkent, I am sure you wouldn't have given the Hajipir Pass, which connects the valley of Poonch and valley of Srinagar. You wouldn't have given it. Now it is gone due to that pressure. That Prime Minister was no more. One of the finest person I always admire. It was due to, because the army right from Nehru's time has not been integrated into policy planning, with a fear they will take over. Who wants to take over a country and mess it up? This country is such a big mess. Army, let it. I have no under any circumstances, but that's what they feed, that they will take over, because of most of the countries became independence between 46 to say 56 were taken over by the armed forces. With that fear, they kept the armed forces aside, due to which we have suffered.
Right now that our eyes are opening and the MOD is out there in tandem with the external affairs, and the 1+1s are happening with multiple nations on a bilateral and on multilateral levels. And so where do we see now the active participation of the military diplomacy stepping in, and how will this balancing act come into place? General Kamath sir.
When the diplomats do the job, because the policy formulation has been done in conjunction with the defense, economy, and the MEA, together we have done the policy. Policy formulation has to be done with everyone. Now, a diplomat, let's say, he has got a defense advisor when he has to pursue a national interest in the civilian field, and at the same time, their armed forces have to respond, and our goals are meeting. If I am able to channelize the thinking of the defense forces towards what the national goals are, that's where he has to utilize me. In order to do that, the country ministry, that whatever we have got national goals, they have to tell, yes, see, the foreign minister and CDS get together. Yes, CDS, let's have a plan. You visit such and such place and get to agree with them from the military side. That is the goal. Then the diplomat out there will get the civilian aspects done, and then the national interest will be served. I do not view these two as two separate compartments, one doing military diplomacy, one doing civil diplomacy. I do not. It has to be a conjoint effort of a nation which pursues its national interest. Where the goals are there, various means are there. Military means, economic means. One of the most foolish decisions ever taken in the annals of the world history is in the Kargil, when they told the armed forces that you will not cross the LAC, but attack and capture this Tiger Hill and whatever. Have you heard of this? A person has come into, and now you say army will not cross, means we can't attack from the spurs which are emanating from behind. We have to go in a frontal and attack. Have you heard this? Not in the annals of world history, any politico fellow will give these orders, because there is no military inputs. I stop here. Jai Hind.
So what had been in the preceding years been diffusely prognosticating about the ascending and risk acceptant China in the early 2000s in national security strategy and national defense strategy is now an evident fact. So though the analysis talked volumes of the certain aggression, little was done from the diplomatic front in preparation for a new era of long-term competition, in which India is anticipated to contend increasingly and more directly with the interests of other states also in possession of considerable military and economic might. So evidently, the military is kept out of trade and commerce strategies and the related deliberations. The ways in which and the conditions under which the Indian armed forces can work in concert with economic and diplomatic elements of Indian power to create effective strategy and coercive force in parallel. So from that of a general staff, coming to the accolades, right? So from looking at a general staff officer, right, grade 1 to that of a 3-star general, technically by default a general is groomed to be a part of decision making process as well as being an observer to how the management of higher directions of war was accomplished by his service, right? This officer is capable and creative and willing to challenge the status quo for national security interests and able to take advantage of missteps and vulnerabilities of the strong arming enemies, right? And then allies to achieve the policy goals and everything. So in the current evolving scenario where the officer of DMA and the role of the CDS is getting carved into a military diplomacy, plausibilities in a way, would this capability be put to test to be accepted, and what the Indian bureaucracy would allow this transition to happen readily and openly? This is in context with the current uh, Chinese situation that we are facing.
Whenever the present discussion of 14th Corps Commander's talks, which have failed, agreed, all have failed. 13, 14, that Dogra point we have not, hot spring we have not been able to do. The reason is, I'll tell you how smart the Chinese are, how they are using their coercive strategy against India. The biggest pain in the neck for them was on the 29th, 30th of August 2020, when we captured the Kailash range, Chushul Heights. From here till the 24th of January, there were 5 meetings of the military commanders. There are 3 meetings of the WMCC. There is a 5 points agreement. I have written an article, 5 points disagreements between Jaishankar and Wang Yi on the 11th. On 11th they met. Within 12 days they met. And what a letdown in that meeting, you know. Here, both sides are equally, you read the text of it, please. Both sides are taking equal blame for the present imbroglio. Rather, China is telling it is your creation, what it has happened. And it is such a letdown for the country, that 5 point agreement which took place. 11th, already Wang Yi had laid the stepping stone in order to vacate for it. On the 24th January, it was decision was given to vacate. 30th of September, the WMCC meeting with the additional foreign secretary, there they meet for the coordination and of the border. Then on the 12th October, 6th November, 24th January, there were so many meetings. In the end, by 24th, even on the 19th of December, the WMCC met. And with the civilians, they tied up. We'll tell the army that they will withdraw on 24th. And 24th, when the directions were given from top, the army is not fighting its own battle. It's a national effort. And 24th, we agreed that it has to come down. And there were about 11 meetings from 1st of September to 30th of March, 11 meetings. And after 24th, the next military commanders meeting was on 20th of February, in order to say, all of you have gone down or not. From your own area, they have made us go down. So who is articulating it? You think if army was kept on its own, with no WMCC and then Jaishankar Wang Yi's meeting, we would have never got down? 2nd of March 2021, Wang Yi and Foreign Minister Jaishankar speak for 75 minutes on the phone, paving the way, because now he is happy that whatever they have to do, they have got it done out of you. 900 kilometers is intact, the most critical area for them, because from Depsan plains, there is tank runs and armor movement. Within 5 to 6 hours, you can touch the general highway GH 219, that the Xinjiang Tibet highway can be touched and broken and interdicted. For that, they came 19 kilometers inside and captured 900 square kilometers, not letting you go via the Y junction to the patrolling point at 10, 11, 12, 13. So ipso facto, they have captured it. They are happy. The only place where they want you down was on the Chushul Heights, because it has got such a dominance over eastern Ladakh that you can see with electronically the highway GEH 219, electronically you can observe it. And the diplomatic, Ministry of External Affairs, CDS, and National Security Council, all three have to act together to make a national strategic policy which has to be signed by the CCS, and budgetary allocations have to be done in order to progress forward, and each sub-objectives have to be laid. They have to be quantified, and then achievable objectives have to be laid year-wise in order to pursue our national interest to make this country a great country. Without a national security doctrine, we are all fumbling in the dark here. Now, tell me, now you are pleading, China, please disengage. When can we disengage? When is your next? 13 has failed, 14 has failed. China, please tell, because you have nothing up your cards. Did you see the pathetic situation which you have landed? And plus, our foreign policy doesn't have a backbone. I asked Sushma Swaraj. She said, we'll believe in one China policy if you believe in one India policy. Second, $80 billion for the dual trade prior to COVID. Now it is $125 billion, a country who has aggressed. You are giving them money, arms, and weapons in order to fight your own soldiers. Why don't you have a system to lay heavy duties on a country which is not, which is aggressing against your borders? Why are you not doing that? Have you seen the situation where we have landed? Even that we are not doing. Third, we have to do a declaration. Any Chinese incursions on the land border, India will have the right to take requisite actions against the country in the Indian Ocean. The entire Malacca Strait is at the mercy of the Indian Navy, with Andaman Nicobar 3-degree channel, 6-degree channel, 10-degree channel, Duncan channel, all this. If we stop their trade, interfere with their trade, disrupt their shipping, you behave there, we'll behave here. Have we done that? Bloomberg interview, Mr. Jayashankar says, do you know what he says? What relations China wants to have with India, I leave it to the Chinese, because we are a doormat. He will do what we want and we'll watch. Why? You exert your diplomacy, you exert your strength. Tell that we'll interfere with the trade. Just make a declaration. Why is he, when he creates all this disturbance in the central sector, Barahoti, Ladakh, Leh, Arunachal, bloody Sikkim, why is he silent on the sea? Because at this point of time, you can disrupt his trade. But soon, now, within next 5 years, you will have an Indian Ocean fleet separately. Watch my words. And they will be operating in Indian Ocean if you don't wake up. Who will tell the country this? That you better increase your navy, and the fight in the land has to be won on the sea as well. See, these are the policies which a country has to absorb. Military diplomacy means I alone going there and speaking to someone means nothing. The nation, all instruments of national power have to be utilized in pursuit of the national goals.
Having a comprehensive, holistic to firstly identify very clearly what are our national interests, what are our goals and objectives, see, in the short term, medium term, long term, and how to together, how to collectively go about pursuing them. I think there is a merit in having a group of experts, working in close coordination with the decision makers in the government and drawn from, let's say, former diplomats. There are people, obviously, any individuals preserve. I mean, there are so many experts, both serving and former diplomats, who have very deep insights, immense knowledge of China. Likewise, our colleagues on the defense side, also inputs from the economic side and so on. So a group such as this, I think, making their recommendations to Honorable Prime Minister, having periodic consultations, I think it would be very useful. We have very, very clear red lines that there is absolutely no compromise ever on any act of terrorism, and terrorism in all its forms and manifestations is most condemnable and has to be confronted and combated with all our might. There is certainly a merit to go beyond some of the established bureaucratic and diplomatic structures. Also, for the leadership to have opportunities to take on board, the considered advice from multiple sources, create some structures, some clusters of experts and advisors, embesh them, integrate them appropriately with the existing structures. And in this context, also, of course, it is, I think, within our system, after the recent tragic passing away of General Bipin Rawat and a number of our other valiant officers in that terrible helicopter crash. I think it is time to announce the appointment of his successor. That would indeed ensure continuity of a very useful structure that was an institution that was created, and it was also I think it would send a very strong message all around.
I see both you speak in unison that there has to be a comprehensive and holistic approach and the overall involvement of Ministry of Defense for overall diplomatic reforms in forging a nation-wise foreign policy, friend or adversary, either ways, to have a homogeneous geographical cybersecurity, trade and economy, any physical or notional deterrence that the country is going to face, and it has to be weighed in by both the segments, and the overall decision making has to happen in that manner. I really thank both of you gentlemen being on Diplomacy Direct today and sharing your views. Thank you so much, and would be our pleasure to have you again at some other topic. And so for now, thank you so much and have a great day. Jai Hind.
Thank you.